Is Guantanamo Bay detainee Mehdi Khan was able to testify in court for about 2 hours about the torture that he suffered. And so, just to get into a little bit of who Mehdi Khan is, he was, well, I guess, has been in Guantanamo Bay since 2006, but before that, since I believe like February 2002, when he actually confessed to being involved in an al-Qaeda plot. He has been, transferred and sent around U.S. black sites for several years. So, Khan grew up until he was 16 in Pakistan and then moved to Maryland and was, I think, working, in the United States for some time before he ends up in Guantanamo Bay. Anyways, now he's 41 years old. He has undergone quite a significant amount of torture, and he talks about some of the worst things, and it's in this article by Spencer Ackerman, where he was waterboarded, put in ice baths, and then it seems like he was waterboarded in other ways where it wasn't necessarily on the decline board. It was essentially just they drowned him until they thought he was about to die, and then they would resuscitate him. He was put in all kinds of stress positions and then left in solitary for quite an extended period of time, which is also a form of torture. But maybe the more unique thing, because people do know about the waterboarding and the stress positions, and not that I want to just glance over it, but I've talked about the torture program a lot, and it's absolutely horrible. But one of the things that he highlights is the use of sexual abuse against the detainees, and this is just another level of horror that went on here, where you had he says it was the medics. One of them actually grabbed his genitalia, which is absolutely disgusting. I don't know why you would do that, but he also says that himself, and I believe he also says other detainees, were force-fed anally rather than the more standard practice, I guess, of doing it like through the nose, even though that's pretty horrific. So they were unnecessarily, under the guise of maybe a medical experiment, shoving things up his ass. And that is, sexual abuse and rape. And these are the horrors that you hear that go on in prisons in places like Mexico or Libya. But here it was happening, I guess, in Cuba, but in the United States torture prison, or actually around the world. They sent him to different blood sites all over the place. I don't think he actually knew what country he was in a good amount of the time. So, all the torture, he says that he basically just started saying things, whatever they wanted to hear. He signed a confession in late August of 2003, it says, and then he was kind of left alone after that. He doesn't even know what the confession says. Now, he is somebody who has, I guess, confessed to his crime pretty early on in February of '02, and then that was not involvement in 9/11. It was a tad somewhere in Southeast Asia, maybe Bangladesh, where he helped curry money that was somehow used in a bombing plot that did leave quite a few people dead. And so, he's now done a lot of time. He also pled guilty in an American court to this, and I'll talk a little bit about the sentence that he received coming up. But another thing that's important to note, in 2012, he started testifying against other members of Al-Qaeda, including the main conspirators of 9/11, including Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, KSM. And so, this is a guy where, while he was tortured, he was willing to say what he knew without it. The torture produced absolutely nothing. But also now, as Americans, something that we have to consider is that there are people in our country that were involved in this torture program who are not held accountable, who are not marked as people who will, torture you, unnecessarily, anally violate you. And that is very, very concerning. And, it's not just me, an anti-war guy, that says this, but actually the military jury at his trial said essentially the same thing. So this was a military trial. The jury was made up of, I believe, 8 military officers. Of course, he was had pled guilty, so they're more deciding on his sentence. I think they picked either the minimum or near the minimum sentence possible, 26 years. However, it seems unlikely that he would serve that whole term, as there's an urging of clemency for not only, I guess, the torture that he went through, the fact that he's admitted to it and has tried to, I guess, be more of a reformed prisoner type person, and also he was testifying against the other members of al-Qaeda. Kind of shows that you're still not loyal to that group and all that kind of stuff. So along with picking a minimum sentence, 7 of the 8 members of the jury, again these are military officers, hand wrote and signed a letter, which I guess is a prerogative of a military jury to do, that condemned the torture that Mr. Khan faced. And so again, while a lot of people are like, oh well, you just like the terrorist or something like that, I've gotten plenty of that kind of "you just hate America" rhetoric in the past. That's obviously not what is going on here, when even the military officers are horrified by what the U.S. government did. Now, along with this testimony, which I guess is the first kind of public court testimony that we've had from a torture survivor, although I do think there's been a couple of people who have been released and who have been interviewed and spoken about their experience otherwise, but we also have Abu Zubaydah, who may be able to testify actually in a Polish court about his CIA torture, and that is because the different blood sites that I guess Zubaydah and other of these detainees were moved to and from. One included being in Poland, and they actually care there a little bit, I guess, about justice when people are being tortured, waterboarded, as Abu Zubaydah was, and they're real upset about this. Now, one of the really nasty things I found out recently about Abu Zubaydah, and this was actually in a John Kiriakou article, I believe he published it at Consortium News, where he outlines that Abu Zubaydah, I guess, had an eye that really wasn't a functional eye anymore, but nonetheless, it was his eye, and the U.S. government just went in and cut it out without his express medical permission to do so. And so, removing body parts from somebody without their medical consent is a horrific level of torture. So one of the interesting things I think about the Abu Zubaydah testimony, or about the trial that he's trying to line up, is he is trying to get the psychologists James Mitchell and Bruce Jessen to actually have to testify at that, which would be interesting, because these are the most horrific people that you could imagine, people who are trained in the field of psychology, meant to heal people's minds. What they were actually trying to do is figure out the recipe for breaking and destroying human minds, and they were paid tens of millions, I think $80 million by the U.S. government to do this. And, of course, they remain free men. And I mean, I would sleep much better at night knowing that they were behind bars for the rest of their lives. These insane torturers, these are the kind of people that in cartoons, are represented by a German doctor who has an evil cackle laugh and is talking about, we're going to remove an arm here and a finger there, and, rip out your toenails and stuff like that. That is the kind of level of horror that these people are operating on. Now, they are more concerned about psychological torture, like people putting freight of buds and coffins with them, but also a lot of physical stuff, beating prisoners, of course, the sexual abuse and everything like that. And this was, this is the torture program. Now, the thing that's been going on, and it went to actually the Supreme Court with Abu Zubaydah's testimony, is I believe the country of Poland is actually pushing to let the United States do this. And so I think it kind of looked like the Supreme Court was actually going to let him testify. And what the DOJ is now offering is that they are going to let Zubaydah testify, but they're going to redact whatever they want of his testimony. And this seems like just a way to appease the Supreme Court without actually letting new information about the torture program out through Abu Zubaydah's testimony. One last story on Gitmo detainees, former ones. The UAE has released 12 former Guantanamo Bay detainees into Yemen. It sounds like these people have essentially served out whatever sentence that they were alleged to have owed, even though they, weren't convicted in any kind of trial or anything like that. But you can't hold people forever just because the U.S. alleges that they were involved in al-Qaeda or whatever. I'm not sure who these people are. I think they're picked up in Afghanistan or Pakistan. I'm not sure even if they're all Yemeni nationals or not. There's not a whole lot of details I could find, but just saying that they're were part of a group of 18 Yemenis and 1 Russian. So I guess they were Yemenis who were transferred from Guantanamo Bay between 2015 and 2017. And anyways, now that they have been released to Yemen, I guess my concern is that this is maybe something that the conservatives, Republicans try to prey upon to say, especially Yemen is a state right now where it's at war all over the place, right? And so if they become in any way involved in that fight, then of course they're going to say, see, you can't release these people ever. And also it's interesting just because of who the UAE has backed, including AQAP in Yemen, if this is possibly them like trying to send in some fighters. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but I think it's kind of an interesting story that I would like to follow up on, and I could see getting some major media attention if any of these people do return to the battlefield. All right.